Hey, so thank you everybody for coming today. Just to reiterate what Kate said, your feedback is essential for us. We're going to be talking about some new things coming out in Mastermind. Almost all of that was driven from feedback from our users, and just listening. We want to listen. So I'm going to wrap up with that when I get done here as well. I just want to reiterate that we're here to listen. And your feedback is really valuable for you. So what I want to do today is just tell you a little bit about Genomenon, our mission, our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal, and how we're going to get there. Let me see if I can get this to advance here. Our mission is pretty straightforward. I actually heard, I was at a conference last week, and I heard an interesting quote that one of the speakers was making, which is, genetics is becoming a data business with a wet lab on the side. And if you start thinking about that, in the world that we're doing with a lot more whole genome sequencing, we're just creating a lot more data. Our mission is to make that data actionable, make genomic data actionable to help really on several different fronts. One is for our clinical users, that we really want to make it easier, faster for you to make better diagnoses, make sure you're getting all the information you need to make the right diagnosis, to connect with the right therapy, your patients with the right therapies. We're working with pharma companies to help them on the precision medicine front, to help them both in the drug development side as well as on the clinical trial side in developing companion diagnostics. And then there's a whole nother area as we start thinking about really making genomic information actionable, and that's opening up new applications like newborn screening and newborn sequencing, where a number of you have probably heard about newborn sequencing. How do you go through and literally sequence millions of babies a year? You can't afford to have a PhD or a master's person in the middle looking at every single variant that's out there. How do we really start organizing the data and curating the entire human genome to make that something as simple as a lookup table, to be able to say, when we're doing screening, to be able to take every baby's genome and run it across the screen, right? And so when we talk about we call it our big, hairy, audacious goal, but our big, hairy, audacious goal, and we revealed this, we've been working on this for a while, and I'll show you a little bit of our timeline, but we revealed it earlier this year where we finally made public and said, hey, our big, hairy, audacious goal is to curate the entire human genome. And we're marching down that step. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those first milestones today. Our goal is to have the clinical exome curated by the end of next year and the entire genome curated at the variant level by the end of 2025. So pretty audacious. That's why that's the A and the B in the BHAG. But that's what we're doing. If you think about 20 years ago, really focused on, with Celera and the NIH, going out and sequencing the first human genome. Here we are 20 years later with millions and millions and millions of genomes that have been sequenced and petabytes and petabytes and petabytes of data. How do you make sense of that data? And so that's really where we're focusing our ambition, is on taking all of the information that's out there, curating that and putting that at the fingertips of clinicians, of researchers, to make your work easier, to make sure you've got the comprehensive data to deliver the best diagnoses you can for your patients. The name Genomenon, I don't know how many of you know this, but the name Genomenon is actually Greek for born out of need. When I first met Mark, our founder, Mark told me, the first time he met, he said, so where did this idea come from, Mark? And how did you come up with this idea of a genomic search engine? He said, Mike, I've spent years and years and years of training, getting my MD, my PhD, and I'm spending 50 hours a week doing Google searches. There's got to be a better way. And that's really what the idea and the kind of the mission that laid out the mission that is Genomenon today. It's starting initially with our search engine and now moving to curated data to bring the data to the clinicians rather than having the clinicians and our users have to go out and find the data they need to make a patient diagnosis. So our focus really has kind of evolved over time. We started with a genomic search engine, and over time we've really broadened that mission to be genomic intelligence. It started in the software world, where we have what could arguably be the world's leading genomic search engine today. I'll show you, a slide here with over 25,000 users around the world using Mastermind to find the articles tied to a patient's variants, and the goal is to get you to that information very, very quickly. Well, over time, we've started moving, as pharma companies started coming to us, they said, hey, this is great, but we don't want to do this one variant at a time. We really want you to lay out all the data for us, start curating this data, and we started moving into this second realm of genomic intelligence, of curating and delivering curated variant landscapes. So every gene, every variant, curated by clinical guidelines, the gain of function, loss of function, drivers all laid out for our pharma partners. And we started realizing that that was going to be very valuable data for our clinical users as well. And so you're starting to see some of that show up now in Mastermind. And then in April, announced in June, we acquired a company called Boston Genetics. So Boston Genetics is a company that we've been working with for the last 3.5 years, doing a lot of work in helping us do a lot of work on the data curation side. We, in fact, had become their biggest customer, and when they approached us at the end of last year and said, hey, we're thinking of selling the company, it just seemed to make a lot of sense to bring those two pieces together. And so when we think in terms of services, we now have, Boston Genetics has been working with some of the largest labs, Invitae's, GeneDx's, Tempus. They've been working with some of the largest labs providing genetic interpretation services. We had the ability to go in and tech enable and leverage some of the technology that we've been using for curation to leverage those services. And I'll be talking a little bit about some of the work that we're doing now with curation on demand as well. So delivering that set of services to deliver the three pillars of what we call genomic intelligence: software, data, and then the services side of that capability. Everybody in this room is probably a dot here somewhere. Where we've got, as I said, we've got over 25,000 users that are, I think it's up near 27,000 users now in over 140 countries, over 2,000 labs that are using Mastermind and the diagnostic side to help diagnose patients and find the right information they need around the variants. And a lot of just world-class pharma companies and world-class genetic testing labs and medical academic centers that have been using Mastermind over the last number of years. So the company, just to give you a little bit of the history, and this will kind of spin you into where we're going with the new release that we're talking about, Mastermind 3.0, and then talk about where we're going in 2024. Genomenon started 9 years ago, spin out of the University of Michigan. Mark Keel really was the founder and the inventor of the idea that first became Mastermind Genomic Search Engine. That was released version 1.0 in 2017. In 2019, we introduced Mastermind 2.0. So Mastermind 1.0 was genes, variants, and diseases. We expanded that to cover phenotypes, therapy searches, added in ClinVar a little bit later in the process. In 2020, as I mentioned, pharma companies came to us and said, hey, we want you to start giving us this curated data. And that's really when we started doing more and more of this curation work and building up all the automation, the AI, the experts in the loop that are really, you can't do curation with just AI alone. We know, and we've been doing now for the last 3-4 years now, that we need to have an expert in the loop that is actually driving and managing and QAing the curation. The curation, I shouldn't talk with my hands because I hit the microphone. Driving the curation work. And so we've been, over the last 4 years, we've been refining this capability to do curation. Well, at the beginning of this year, as I mentioned, we made our BHAG public. And with Mastermind 3.0, and Brittany's going to get into a lot more of this, we're going to be talking about, we're going to be introducing Mastermind 3.0, which was what we're calling the first major milestone in curating the genome, which means that what we've done and what we'll be showing you today is curation of the entire clinical exome at the gene level. So 5,500 genes, over 9,500 gene-disease relationships, laying all of that out. What we found is when we started looking at the usage of Mastermind, 50% of the searches were coming into the gene level. And we were like, well, wait a minute, we built a variant search engine and our users are coming into the gene level. And this is where your feedback is really valuable, right? We started hearing from our users saying, what we really want to understand is what's going on at the gene level. It's where we start before we dive into the variants. And so now we're releasing this entire into Mastermind. You'll be able to see that all of these genes and the gene-disease relationships are all going to be laid out for you, one place, for you to start your search when you're starting at the gene level. We've also added, as I mentioned, with this acquisition of Boston Genetics, we've added a set of services. So we're going to continue on the path that Boston Genetics has been doing, delivering interpretation services, but we're also introducing curation on demand. We call it Curate Pro. But if you've seen the variants that are curated in Mastermind today, what we're offering with this service is the ability to deliver. If you go and look in Mastermind, it hasn't been curated, you can get a variant, your set of variants curated at that same level that's inside of Mastermind on demand. So that's a service, that's something you're interested in. We're happy to expand on that and tell you more about what we're doing in that area. So let me just wrap and say thank you. We listened to your input. Mastermind 3.0 is a direct result of your feedback. We want to ask for more feedback. We want to hear from you. So throughout this next couple of hours, raise your hands, ask us questions, tell us things we need to be doing better. We know there's a lot of things we can there's a lot of options on the table. We want to make sure we're designing and continue to advance Mastermind to meet your needs. So with that, I'll give it back to Kate, who will introduce our next speaker.